what happens? What do you experience at that moment? Is it blank?
This was blank because
for the first 10 years he was involved in many of the research projects, setting those up and collaborating with them, in particular those to do with healing, meditation and creative altruism. There's now a Temple Award for creative altruism which is coordinated by the Institute of Neurosciences. And for the last 5 years he's been involved more in the educational outreach, organising a mega conference which this year was entitled Questing Spirit and was held in the desert in California in the comparative cool, he was told, of about 105 degrees, it shouldn't be near 130. So if you think you're hot here, then just give that some thought. And the last year he's been concentrating on what he's going to be talking about to us today, and this was a project, the Pathfinding project, which he initiated in collaboration with Willis Harman, and there's a sense in which Willis has passed the torch of the Pathfinding project to Tom, and he's going to pass it to us today. So Tom, it's a real pleasure to see you here, and we very much look forward to hearing what you have to say.
It's a real pleasure to be here for the second Beyond the Brain conference. I worked with David in 1994 and 1995 to plan the first one, and then could not attend. So I feel that the work we began together, David, for me personally is coming to some fruition this morning, being able to be with you and share some of the work we're doing at the Institute in the field that we call societal learning with you. I'm going to spend the first part of my talk talking about how Willis and I framed the concept of pathfinding and approached the pathfinding project. And then I'm going to venture into some new territory. And I will do so inviting you to explore with me the concept of healing the social body. I gave David that title for this talk after looking at the title for the overall conference and looking at some of what the other presenters were going to be presenting. And only after I gave David that title did I realize that I didn't really know what I meant by healing the social body. So I've given it a good deal of thought between then and now, and I want to share with you some of the territory that emerged for me. I also want to say at the outset that I'm not a scientist. I've listened with great appreciation to the presentations thus far, and I love science. And I'm very excited by the developments taking place in science. But I'm not a scientist, and I don't have to struggle with the cloak of the modern scientific paradigm that I watch so many scientists struggling to shrug off in order to step more fully into a larger experience of ourselves and a larger view of the universe. So I want to say at the outset that I believe we are spiritual beings. I believe that everything is an expression of the unfolding of spirit, that consciousness is awakening within that, and that we can ground ourselves in that ground of being, that sacred ground of being, and we can find in that a natural intelligence, an intuitive intelligence and caring that tells us what nourishes life, and that's true personally and collectively. And I think it's the challenge for each and every one of us to ground ourselves as individuals in that experience and to begin to ground our ways of being together in that experience. And that's what I want to talk with you about. The Pathfinding Project is about a year and a half old now. As David said, Willis worked on it for the last year of his life. He really was the heart and soul of the project. And I collaborated with him on it and am now carrying that work forward. But it's a collaborative project that Noetic Sciences has undertaken in conjunction with Pathways to Peace, a small organization in the U.S. that works extensively with the United Nations, with the Fetzer Institute, which is one of our close strategic partners in the U.S. and which has sponsored a great deal of research in mind-body healing and subtle energies, and is responsible for underwriting a television series that some of you may have heard of called Healing in the Mind with Bill Moyers. This was aired in the United States in 1993 and was really one of the seminal occurrences that brought the concepts of mind-body healing to a broad public audience. And with the World Business Academy, our third major partner in this work. There are three questions we're exploring in the Pathfinding Project. What is the world we live in? How can we best understand and characterize the present state of the world? What's the world we'd like to live in? When we deeply dream of the kind of communities, the kind of organizations, the kind of cultures we would like to belong to, what does that look like? And the third question then is, how do we get from here to there? In looking at the present state of the world, we noted, first of all, that there seem to be a number of very fundamental systemic dilemmas, as we came to call them, that are ongoing and that do not seem to be very susceptible to resolution within the current framework and by the current approaches that are being taken to them. We've identified about a dozen of those, and I'll mention just a few to give you a feeling for the kind of issues that we're looking at. One of the fundamental systemic dilemmas has to do with resolving the crisis of meaning that we experience personally and collectively as both modern and traditional sources of meaning erode, and as we find ourselves without a coherent and compelling story to help us make sense of our lives and to find a viable way into the future. Addressing the ecological challenge of developing social and economic systems that don't undermine the integrity of the natural systems in which they exist. It's a second fundamental dilemma. Questioning the growth imperative that values material progress and economic growth above human health and environmental sustainability, social justice, cultural vitality. Providing meaningful work for everyone, meaningful roles in society which no longer seem to provide a meaningful place for everyone who wants a job, and no longer seem to understand that each of us has special gifts to bring forward. Now, each of these are in and of themselves a very complex sets of issues, and the dilemmas are all related, which in our view is a clue. The fact that they're all related suggests that they all are expressions of deeper underlying assumptions and values and beliefs. In other words, expressions of human consciousness. So we've undertaken to look to some extent at the kind of thing that Peter was talking about last night. What are some of the assumptions of the modern Western worldview that are giving rise to these dilemmas, and that we probably need to we certainly need to question, and we need to find a way of bringing forth a new worldview. Materialism, obviously, denies the reality of the sacred. Reductionism fosters the experience of fragmentation and dissociation. Positivism shrinks our experience of the world, the idea that the only things that are real are what we experience through our five senses. The emphasis on objectivity that Peter talked about last night distances us from our own embodied experience, from a genuine heartfelt connection with others, and from a living relationship with the world. The hyper-individualism that characterizes increasingly our modern, more consuming cultures undermines the sense of connectedness and community and caring that we all rely so much on. And the dominance of economic values leads us to view everything in monetary terms. And this leads us to discount the future and any experience that can't be quantified or commodified. These are the invisible forces shaping our lives and our institutions. As Roger Walsh said, they're products, the dilemmas that we're trying to address are products of our individual and shared mindsets. So a transformation of consciousness appears to be needed to resolve these global dilemmas. And as Willis pointed out, the most powerful activity that any of us can be engaged in is the work of changing our minds. The second dimension of the Pathfinding Project has to do then with bringing forth a vision or visions of the world that we'd like to inhabit. I emphasize visions because it's not our idea that any single organization or even group of organizations can bring forth a vision for the whole that is going to be meaningful for everyone. So the real work of pathfinding is involving everyone in the process. So when David said that I'm here today to pass the torch to you, that's literally true. I'm inviting you to step into the process of deeply, powerfully envisioning the kind of world that you'd like to live in, the kind of person you'd like to be, and to dedicate yourself to bringing that forth. But when we've done this with small groups, asking people to envision a future world that is nourishing of life, that is sustainable, that addresses the fundamental dilemmas I mentioned, so a number of core themes tend to emerge. People talk about healthy communities. They talk about everyone having creative work. Talk about everyone's personal dignity and value being acknowledged. Human scale, lifelong learning, and the equality of men and women, and a balance between masculine and feminine in the culture. Talk about the presence of the sacred in all aspects of our lives. Talk about beauty being part of our lives. Harmony with nature. The integration of youth and adults and elders in the culture. Talk about a human pace to life. And talk about technology serving human values. Now, if we had done a visualization and I had asked you all to imagine a future you'd like to live in, you probably would have come up with some of those same themes. What is it that happens that in our quiet moments we know that that's the kind of world we'd like to live in? We know that it's possible to live that way because we've all had tastes of it, and we don't do it. It's not the world we're bringing forward for the most part. Some people suggest that this is, even to pose this question, as utopian thinking. It's romantic fantasy, misguided idealism. Some would say it's even a dangerous heresy. But Jay Ogilvy, one of Willis's colleagues from Stanford Research Institute and a founder of the Global Business Network, pointed out that, yes, today, pragmatism is in better favor than utopianism. But there are times when pragmatism, the philosophy of whatever works, doesn't work. There are times when business as usual is doomed, when even incremental reforms are inadequate, when discontinuities are inevitable and radical alternatives the only way out. At such times, it is irresponsible to refuse to be utopian, for only on the other side of a seemingly unbridgeable gap can conditions be once again stable. In a nutshell, I think that's the challenge we face collectively today. And it's the challenge we're trying to address through the pathfinding work. I spent a little time in the rainforest in Ecuador with an indigenous people called the Shuar. I traveled there with an anthropologist named John Perkins, who was trained in the shamanic traditions of the Shuar. And John asked the shaman that trained him, what can I do to help preserve your culture, preserve these shamanic traditions, to help preserve the rainforest in which your culture and these traditions are so deeply embedded? And John was told by the Shuar, help your people change their dream. It's your people's dream that is destroying the rainforest, destroying our culture, destroying our traditions. The worldview that we've all been conditioned into is a dream that we're living in. It's a dream that's being perpetuated on the earth by us, and we're called to awaken. So we have two tasks before us. We live in a culture that's, in many respects, not sustainable. There's increasing evidence that ecologically, within the next couple decades, we're going to be approaching some very critical threshold points. Socially, there are a number of issues which suggest that the trends in the economy and society are not sustainable. So we have and at the same time, there are many, many people, everyone in this room, I would assume, who are dedicating themselves to bringing forth a different worldview, a different vision of the future, a different sense of possibility. Noetic Sciences and the Fetzer Institute sponsored a survey of the American population, trying to understand and get a better handle on precisely how many people held some of these kinds of new values and worldviews. And we discovered that up to 24%, perhaps 24% of the adult American population, 44 million people, hold values that have to do with ecological sustainability, an ecumenical approach to spirituality, social responsibility, an interest in personal growth, and so on. And that 20 million people hold that entire set of values and are dedicating their lives to bringing it forward. That's almost 10% of the adult American population. And there's similar work that's been done in Europe to suggest that the numbers are not so different there. So there's this growing body of people who recognize the challenge we face and are trying to bring forth a different way of being. So we have two challenges. One is the hospice, the graceful death of ways of being that no longer serve us. The second is to midwife the birth of much more just, equitable, positive, and sustainable cultures. There are many fields of theory and research and practice that are coming together right now to comprise a new integral worldview that has within it a different set of possibilities for us as individuals and collectively. The fact that these insights and perspectives and practices are emerging simultaneously in so many different fields, in so many different institutions, in so many individuals' lives, in the direct personal experience of so many people, suggests that they are co-emergent expressions of a deeper healing movement in consciousness itself. Consciousness is awakening through each and every one of us. I just want to very briefly mention some of the fields that we've been tracking and some of the kinds of insights that they contribute to this emerging integral worldview. Just to give you a taste of the breadth of what's taking place here. Consciousness research, we've been talking about so far in this conference. Mapping the ecologies of inner experience, exploring the powers of the mind, helping us to understand our essential interconnectedness. The healing arts and integral medicine, illuminating how the mind and body and spirit are integrally related, and illuminating the healing power of relationship, of caring, of connectedness. The esoteric and spiritual traditions, helping us understand in much deeper ways than the traditional religions have tended to do, the subtle and transpersonal dimensions of our experience, and particularly providing practical tools for the transformation of experience and identity. psychology and psychotherapy, helping us understand conscious and unconscious processes, the nature of perception and how our perceptual processes bring forth the world that we inhabit. Exploring emotional intelligence, a new field in the States. Moral intelligence, the dynamics of personal development. Family systems and how they shape us. Complexity and chaos theory, helping us understand how complex systems, including complex human systems, very far from equilibrium, which is certainly how I would characterize the turbulent global environment we live in now, can suddenly shift to stable new forms of order at a higher level of integration. Ecology, eco-psychology, helping us understand our profound connection to the natural world, the fundamental principles guiding the growth and development of all natural or living systems, fostering a reverence for life. Transformative learning theory, including the work that's being done in organizations, articulating principles and practices for transformative change in human systems at all levels. All of these fields are coming together at this time. There's a confluence of insight, experience, understanding, practice coming out of our spiritual traditions, coming out of science, coming out of the diverse cultural traditions from around the world, coming out of professional fields, coming out of popular culture, and again, coming out of our own direct experience that is laying the ground for a different way of being for us personally and collectively. They're coalescing in an integral worldview that tells us that our inner and outer worlds are profoundly interdependent, that personal transformation and societal learning are deeply linked, that consciousness is a causal force in the world, that we have multiple ways of knowing, of being, and of creative expression available to us, and that the truth that we learned growing up, the emphasis on separation, the emphasis on the primacy of the individual, the emphasis on distancing ourselves by taking an objective stand to reality, are only partial truths. They need to be balanced by equal truths on the other side in the service of an integral vision, an integral way of being that says that individual and community need to be held together, that says masculine and feminine need to be held together. And together they're creating a new pattern for the future, a new story. We're not there yet. Thomas Berry says, it's all a question of story. We're in trouble now because we do not have a good story. The old story, the account of how the world came to be and how we fit into it, is not functioning properly, and we have not learned a new story. Now, we're between stories. One of the things we've come to understand better than we ever have before is that culture and consciousness co-evolve. And as communications have linked us globally, as the world has, as human beings on the world have begun to form a single global community, consciousness has evolved along with it. So I think that part of the new story that's emerging has to do with the birth of a global consciousness. I think if you, as historians of the future, 50, 100 years from now, look back on the last couple decades of the 20th century and the first couple decades of the 21st, part of the story they'll tell about the important developments that took place at this time in history are that the peoples of the earth came together and formed an identity as a global species, created a global consciousness, a global brain, a global morality, and a global vision. It's not news to say that we live in a highly interdependent world. It's almost trite. The political boundaries that were so important in ordering and structuring the last 200 or 300 years of Western history, world history, are becoming increasingly irrelevant. Travel, the travel of people, the migration of peoples, emigration, immigration, disease, pollution, all cross national borders. The economy is truly global. 2 years ago, when I came out of the Ecuadorian rainforest with a group of Americans, we had been staying in a very primitive encampment where we were fed by a German man who was living with the Shuar. And when we flew in and out in small planes belonging to a Catholic mission that was run by an Irish priest. When we came out back to the edge of the jungle, we rode in a Toyota Jeep to a Chinese restaurant where we drank Mexican beer that was served by a French woman. In a nutshell, that was my experience of the global village. And we can all have that. We can walk into downtown Cambridge. We can walk into the city center and have a similar experience. We're intricately connected with people we don't know. Our lives are commingled with theirs, and our fates are intertwined. The global communication system has probably had the greatest impact on the birth of this global consciousness I'm talking about. Peter Russell, I think, coined the phrase global brain, and he said billions of messages continually shuttle back and forth in an ever-growing web of communication, linking the billions of minds of humanity together into a single system. Now, information analysts, one in particular, Robert Entman, says, looking at this phenomenon, that a substantial increase in the functional intelligence of the species seems imminent. We only have to think of some of the images that we all share to realize the power of the global communication system and its importance in creating a global consciousness. We all have seen images of children of war, victims of disaster around the world, teenage soldiers in continental Africa, famine victims. We all thrill to the fall of the Berlin Wall, to the peaceful transition of power in South Africa. In my mind, one of the images that stands out from recent years is the image of a lone Chinese youth standing in front of a tent in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. We all have these images in our minds. They're forming a kind of global intelligence that I believe is awakening through us and provides the foundation for the work that I now want to move on and talk about, which is healing the social body. Peter mentioned last night that the Institute of Noetic Sciences was founded by Edgar Mitchell. Ed was an Apollo astronaut, Apollo 14 astronaut. He was the sixth man to walk on the moon. And like many of the astronauts and cosmonauts, Ed had an epiphany in space that changed his life. Ed saw the Earth and the human species on it as a single, living, evolving, conscious organism or being. We can imaginatively experience this even if we can't go out into space and see it for ourselves. We can imaginatively see the human species on the planet as a single whole, as a social body, and we can inhabit it with feeling. I tried to do that in thinking about this talk. It represented a new step for me. In the pathfinding work, as I said earlier, we've asked, what's the state of the world, what's the world we want to live in, and how do we get from here to there? And we had taken a kind of piecemeal approach to it, in the sense that we identified a number of dilemmas, and then we looked at what's taking place in the world, what kinds of work are people doing in response to these dilemmas. And so we've got an extensive report that talks about work going on in governance, in healthcare, in education, in business, in all of the spheres of life that is positive and is aimed at promoting a sustainable, peaceful world. I realized, in thinking about the social body as a single concept, that there's another approach one can take to that. I think we've all probably had the experience in our lives as individuals of having a taste or an intuition of the kind of person that we're called to be or that we're trying to become. It's, in my experience, that taste has associated with it certain qualities. I might experience, I might realize that there's a greater energy available to me, or that if I opened my heart, there would be a different quality of being available to me. And I realize that we can take that same kind of approach to envisioning the social body and its healing. So, and if we do, what do we see as the characteristics of a healthy social body? We envision humanity as a single species on the planet, struggling to awaken, struggling to heal. What are the qualities that we would associate with it? 6 immediately stood out for me. The social body would be self-aware. We would recognize our mutual interdependence, and we would recognize our power and responsibility as a human species on the planet. The media would serve as a mirror for collective self-reflection, for helping us understand the important issues and opportunities that face us, rather than distracting us with mindless entertainment and what passes for news. But we can go beyond that kind of informational component of this and say that there's a quality of belonging that's called for. The self-awareness of the whole is infused with a feeling we can have a feeling for the whole, a sense of belonging, a deep sense of connection to the whole. And out of that comes a certain kind of deep intuitive knowing that guides the work that we do in our lives, in whatever field we're involved. Brother David Steindl-Rast says, if you really have this strong interior experience of belonging, then you know that it calls for a certain way of living. Moral rightness consists in behaving as people behave when they belong together. That's the kind of feeling for the whole that we need to cultivate globally. Integrity. The whole of the social body would have integrity. Each person, community, tribe, country, people being a valued part of the whole. No one's welfare being sacrificed for the greed of another. Biological, social, cultural diversity being affirmed, being supported, being valued for the synergy that it creates. This social body would be resilient. The systems we created, the communications, healthcare, education, energy systems, transportation systems, would not be vulnerable to sudden disruption and collapse, as all of our major systems are right now. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever one does, whatever affects one directly, affects all indirectly. We have to recognize that the world we live in now does not have this kind of integrity, that a tiny fraction of the world's people control a majority of the world's wealth, that there's a tremendous disparity between rich and poor countries, and a growing disparity in many countries between rich and poor within those countries, that resources globally are distributed inequitably, that poor communities suffer the greatest environmental threats, that women and children continue to be sold into slavery around the world, and that corporations have the power to sacrifice the well-being of individuals and communities in the service of shareholder profit, is simply not right. So the challenge is how to sustain our gaze, how to tell the truth about that, and how to cultivate that sense of belonging and that moral imagination. that allows us to act with power in relation to it. A healthy social body would have a feeling of vitality. Everyone would have a voice and a meaningful role, and we would all be using our full capacities as human beings, not the limited range that our science and our culture has conditioned us to accept. Again, this is not the world we live in now, when many lack meaningful work, are marginalized, when inner city youth are seduced by gangs and the drug trade because there are no meaningful options available to them, and when our attention and our life energy and our money are dissipated on mindless consumption. The challenge then is to create a world which we all participate fully, which offers opportunities for creative work on the part of all of us. A healthy social body has an intrinsic sense of intelligence, meaning, and purpose. Again, we've all had moments in our own lives, I think, when personally we experience that transcendent sense of connection, and we know that life, we know that the universe is imbued with that kind of intrinsic meaning and purpose. Our challenge is to create a world in which the social body as a whole, collective consciousness, shines with the light of this intelligence and is organized in relation to it, is organized to call it forth, and to continually be deepening our understanding and experience of what nourishes life. Willis pointed out many years ago that all cultures have a central project. What I've come to think of, having recently read James Hillman's book on the Soul's Code, as the daemon, or the soul of the culture. The central project for modern Western societies over the last couple hundred years has been material well-being, economic development and growth, economic production and consumption. This is changing. And if the central project of the emerging global civilization is not to be economic production and consumption, absent guiding social values, what might it be? We all need to be involved in that conversation, but we posit that it might be to nurture full human growth and development, to nurture our development as full capacity people in a full capacity global civil society, to support human learning in the broadest sense, create a home for humanity within nature that nourishes all life, and to embody and express our deepest understanding and experience of spirit. The fifth characteristic of a healthy social body is that it has a ground. Humanity does not exist in a vacuum, as much as we've come to believe that, and to believe that we're the apex of evolution, free to do with the natural world as we like. A healthy social body recognizes its embeddedness in the natural systems that sustain it. All of its institutions are designed in harmony with the natural principles that guide all living systems. A healthy social body is at home in the cosmos, and a healthy social body has a spiritual ground. We've lost that ground. Nature's become a collection of resources for our consumption and use. The sacred has been denied, marginalized, institutionalized. Our challenge is to reestablish that sense of connection and belonging, and to cultivate that quality of longing in our own hearts and our own spirits that calls us to reconnect and re-enchant the world. Finally, a healthy social body is sustainable. We attend to the long-term health and viability of our cultures and of the world. This calls for us to become activists. The poet Adrienne Rich wrote, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed, I have to cast my lot with those who year after year perversely with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. We're all called to help reconstitute the world. We could think of other characteristics of a healthy social body, but I've mentioned just a few to help, I hope, begin to help us see that there's a different way of envisioning the whole that we are part of, that we're participating in, and that our lives, in part, are helping to create, and that our lives can help transform. So what does it mean to participate in the healing the social body? There's no recipe. I don't want to give you 10 simple steps to healing the social body. But I think out of the fields that I mentioned earlier and out of our experience are emerging several bodies of knowledge that bear directly on this. These are bodies of knowledge that serve as touchstones, that provide principles, practices, commitments, that constitute a kind of shared intelligence that we're all contributing to and that we can all draw on in our own lives. And the communities that those of us in this room represent, I think, have something unique to contribute because we recognize the essential interconnectedness that shapes and guides us all. So the first body of knowledge, I'll mention just a few again. We could come up with a much more comprehensive set. I'll mention a few to give a sense of the direction of this. First body of knowledge that we can draw on and that we're contributing to is how we heal as individuals. It has to do with finding our own spiritual rhythms, our own essence, knowing our own unique contribution in the world, opening to our own sense of deeper purpose and calling. What's important is that we not wait to try to figure out what our purpose is, or try to figure out what the right answer is to the problem that confronts us. It's important that we take the next step, trusting that the ground will come up to meet our foot. Rumi said, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you really love." One of the tenets of the integral worldview that's emerging is that we live in a participatory universe. It's therefore incumbent upon us to explore what we're participating in. We must do so courageously, with a willingness to acknowledge our own complicity in that which fosters dis-ease. We must ask what privileges we have by virtue of our position in systems that are unjust, unhealthy, and organized around values that don't nourish life or foster the awakening of consciousness. We must honestly explore what we are willing to do in response to what we see. We must commit ourselves to staying awake, for often we simply fall back asleep. We forget because it seems too difficult to sustain the gaze. Or we seem too powerless in the face of much greater forces. Or because the options available to us seem so few. We must sustain our gaze. Willis used to point out in the last few years that one of the greatest powers we have available to us is the withdrawal of legitimacy from institutions that no longer serve us. If we were the underprivileged, the dispossessed, the disenfranchised, what would we be asking of those in our position? What would we hope for? What would we expect? Another body of knowledge has to do with how we move from despair to empowerment, how we sustain the gaze. It's not easy to look at the world and to recognize that our entire way of life is threatened. It's not easy to do that personally. It's certainly not easy to do that collectively. But we have ways of moving through the kinds of despair and anger that come up as we experience the bitter truths of the world. Move through them on our way to not only empowerment, but a deep sense of joy and a willingness or desire to serve. But it means not closing our eyes to that which is painful and bearing witness being mindful in a way that allows the full creative resources we have available to us collectively to be brought to bear on that which we're looking at. A particularly important part of healing the social body is using the power of positive imagery in a creative way. David Cooperrider, professor of organizational theory in the United States, has said that human beings are heliotropic, by which he means that there's a natural tendency for human systems to organize themselves in relation to positive, anticipatory images. The power of expectations is one example of this. Another example is the placebo effect. What an incredible phenomenon. Out of the myriad possible responses the mind-body system could make to being given a placebo, it makes precisely the correct response. We know how to organize ourselves in a way to bring forth that which we deeply desire. This is true collectively as well as at the personal level. So the sociologist Fred Pollock wrote, "The rise and fall of images precedes or accompanies the rise and fall of cultures. As long as a society's image is positive and flourishing, the flower of culture is in full bloom. Once the image begins to decay and lose its vitality, the culture does not long survive." So the work of pathfinding, the work we're all called to do, is the work of bringing forth positive images. Very quick story on that. I was, like many I think, astonished that the transition of governments in South Africa took place as peacefully as it did several years ago. It turns out that there was some behind-the-scenes work that laid the groundwork for that peaceful transition. A small group of people representing all of the major political parties, representing a variety of fields and institutions, came together to explore several different scenarios for how that transition might take place and for what would happen in South Africa after the transition. Each of the parties came to the table with their own preferred future, their own preferred scenario. And they discovered, as they worked through them, that one after another, none of them would provide a viable future for South Africa. Together, they discovered a scenario for how a peaceful transition could take place that would lay the groundwork for the stable development of the country. And they committed themselves to taking the guidelines that came out of that scenario into their fields, into the business world, into the political dialogue, into a number of different arenas. And it was that work, that positive image of possibility of the future, that helped guide the transition of power in South Africa. There are other bodies of knowledge that have to do with healing the social body, have to do with how we foster an environment that nurtures true healing and creativity, that allows everybody to be part of the work, using their unique gifts, that fosters the healing capacity of the whole. An important part of the work of healing the whole has to do with learning to love the work. When we ask what prevents healing, what prevents change, we ask what prevents healing in a personal sense, we see that it's conditioning, it's fear, ignorance. Collectively, the same is true. And the work of healing the body means loving the work, being willing to engage in the day-to-day, sustained, nitty-gritty work of engaging our conditioning, of meeting our fear, of stepping into the black hole of our own ignorance. It means living in the zone of creative tension, working with passion and not being attached to results. Holding the vision for a long-term awakening and knowing that we can awaken now. We may not ever create utopia, but we can have a taste of paradise in any moment. And finally, I think we must pray. The crisis of our time is essentially a spiritual crisis. The Buddhists talk about taking refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. Our challenge is to bring forth in this era new Buddhas, new Dharmas, new Sanghas. The importance of the Buddha is that we have a touchstone for our own awakening. That we're grounded in the sacred source of our true identity. The importance of the Dharma, or practice, is that it keeps us on our learning edge, helps us, through sustained practice, create a center of gravity for the work, and helps us ground and embody our insights and experiences. And the importance of the Sangha, or community, is that the work is difficult. The work of healing and transformation takes time, sustained attention, and the support of others. This community, the communities we represent, can serve one another in that way. We can be a Sangha for each other. We can help create a new set of practices. We can help remind each other that we all have that sacred source within us, which is the touchstone of our truth and the foundation for healing the social body. We're called to sacred leadership. We're all called to be sacred leaders. That means calling ourselves to be who we truly are, calling one another to be who we truly are, holding the vision that we can bring forth the world that reflects our deepest possibilities. That we can move from focusing only on our own spiritual awakening to focusing on collective awakening. To be a sacred leader is to say it's possible to awaken. Anything less is a betrayal of our own deep sense of possibility and destiny. There is help available to us. Rumi again says, if your love is joined to the great love, you are helping people you do not know and have never even met. It helps to remember that we also benefit from the work others are doing. So perhaps this is what it finally comes down to. Can we love our lives, love our own learning process, love the slow, mysterious unfolding of our souls, love the uncertainty, love the challenge of committing ourselves to the process, to the great work, to our own innate nature, to our trust in one another's best selves? Can we love the adventure of living, love the earth, love the service we offer in a sacred way? The poet Juan Ramon Jimenez said, and I will close with this, I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing. And nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens, or has everything happened? And are we standing now in the new life? Thank you.
Some of us are more aware of some, and some are more aware of others. And we know that they're pointing towards number of new principles, of which interconnected participation is one of which you mentioned, and they're all beginning to crystallize now. And I think this is a very exciting part of the process, because I think one of the reasons we come to conferences to think or confer together is to achieve that kind of clarity, or to achieve a greater degree of clarity than when we arrived. And when we have the clarity, then we can formulate a vision. And when we formulate a vision, we can start asking ourselves how we get there, and we can really make progress. Until these two stages have taken place, or the clarification, the groundwork, the looking into the assumptions, and all the perspectives that you gave us, then we can't formulate a vision until we formulate it. Unless we formulate a vision, we won't go anywhere other than where we're already headed. So thank you very much indeed for introducing those larger aspects to the conference. It's beyond the brain, both in terms of the spiritual input you gave, but also in terms of the beyond the person to the collective and social being that we also are. We have time, I think, for two questions, and one is Basil and the other is Julia. Not yet. Sorry, on the left.
Present us with higher ideas, but higher ideas need techniques to be practiced. About 70 years ago, Moral Government, or the Oxford Group as it was called, believed that they were on the point of changing the world. Today, from the Maharishi with transcendental meditation. They create some techniques, but as far as I know, they have not so quickly changed the world or changed humanity. And unless you have changed humanity on a large scale quickly, I can't see how your ideas can be realized. The ancient civilizations of the East were not those that made civilization available to large numbers of people. Only small numbers of people enjoy the benefits of civilization. That being the case, there is no problem of impinging on the world resources. But today, larger and larger numbers of people having their material standards raised, and that is one of the problems of pollution which we are now having. How do you then make such changes in human nature as you have envisaged on a large scale fairly quickly?
I expected that question. There are several ways to answer it. One way is to say that that we have technologies available to us now, technologies of communication, for example, that make it possible for ideas and perspectives to be disseminated much more quickly and much more broadly than ever before. Now, those same technologies are not necessarily being used very consciously to support the kind of transformation that I was talking about at this point. And in fact, what we have right now is more a chaos of voices within the global communication system. So I think one of the great challenges for us is how to create an ethic, as it were, or certain to create a context in which dialogue can occur among people with very different stories about who we are and where we ought to be going. I presented one view. It's not the only view, and as I said at the outset, I don't expect everyone to hold that view. But I think if some of us hold that view strongly and engage in dialogue in a constructive way with others who hold the same view, then out of that dialogue and out of the values that define that dialogue, values of mutual respect and commitment to staying with the dialogue, can come, as happened in South Africa, can come a common vision that reflects deeper human values that I think we all have access to, not just small numbers of us who are blessed to have access to certain privileges in our lives. The other thing I would say is that, as I said about the survey we've done, there are growing numbers of people who are interested in these kinds of perspectives and these kinds of ideas. And those people are active in a variety of different fields. The most important changes taking place in the world are not taking place from the top down or from the bottom up. They're taking place from the inside out, and people experiencing them in every sphere of life: business, education, healthcare, criminal justice, governance, international development. We could go right down the list. Are all doing very creative work to ground these ideas in very practical ways. What I did not present, because it would have just been overwhelming, is the kind of mapping we've started to do of the practical work that's being done. But I'll give you just one example. There's a man in Bangladesh named Muhammad Yunus who's created the Grameen Bank, which makes loans to poor Bangladeshis, mostly women, who are interested in creating micro-enterprises. And the loans are very small, on the order of $50 to $100 US. And these women have just begun to transform Bangladeshi society through the work that they've done in these micro-enterprises. They get these loans, they start a business, they pay the loans back. The payback, with a very slight amount of interest, is then turned over and funneled back into the community. And they've given away just billions of dollars through these microloans, as they're called. And that model is being picked up and used in many regions of the world now. It's being used elsewhere in Southeast Asia. It's being used in Latin America. It's even being used in the United States. So this is an example of, I think, of a case in which someone is using some of the same principles of trusting in the creative capacity of individuals, in the power of mutual support, and coming up with a social technology, in effect, that starts to change the systems, change the larger system from the inside out. And I could list many initiatives like that. I want to say many of the people that are doing some of the best work to bring forth the kind of world that I talked about would not talk about consciousness at all. David mentioned that we give something called the Temple Awards for Creative Altruism each year. We give these to people who have devoted their lives to creative community service. One of the awards this year went to a woman in San Francisco named Catherine Sneed, who created something called the Garden Project for prisoners and people coming out of prison. And it's a way to teach them skills, to help them build or regain a sense of self-worth and self-esteem, and to help them transition from prison to a meaningful role in society. It's all about cultivating, helping people awaken to their own unique gifts and their own connection with their own sacred source, and with the possibility of a genuine connection with others and with the earth that is nourishing of life. All the things I talked about, Catherine would not use any of those words, but that's the work she's doing. And again, there are just thousands and thousands of people doing this work. So
there's more going on than we know about.
It's the right question, but there's more going on than we know about because it's not being brought to our attention. We haven't created cycles of information and intelligence that nourish life. We have cycles of information and intelligence that keep us locked into a particular paradigm right now.
We'll have actually to Julia.
Jean-Marc Montel, who is a French psychiatrist, but he has developed something quite profound, as I understand it. He has a profound and practical interest in psychology, psychiatry, and the spirit. He's lived and worked in Israel since 1991, although he frequently returns to his native France, where he conducts workshops and seminars about these topics that he's so interested in. And indeed, he's founded and is president of the International Association of Spiritual Psychiatry. He's written many books, but he tells me that they're in French. However, he has a home page on the internet, and there is a web page for the International Association for Spiritual Psychiatry. And on those pages, I understand, there are many articles in English. So those of you who don't have French and want to follow this further can certainly do so in that way. There's a leaflet available about the Institute, about the institution as well, at this conference. He has developed, in particular, focused approaches to the treatment of many of the common psychological, psychiatric conditions, but using spiritual means, including meditation and other non-dualistic practices. And I think, in a way, this makes a splendid complement to the talk from Andrew Power that we heard this morning. Now, contrary to what it says in your printed programme, this is not going to be an explanation of properties transcending the mind, but an exploration. And that I find a very encouraging word. Jean-Marc tells me that words will perhaps not play quite such a greater part in his presentation as in some of the others, and that there will be something of an experience here. And he'll be exploring, as I understand it in particular, something which he very refreshingly calls the I, that's to say an I like that, which he doesn't call the self or the ego. So I think we're going to have an exploration into the nature of the I. And so I'm very happy and very much looking forward to Jean-Marc's presentation, which is called Beyond Psychology, a living exploration of that which does not belong to the mind.
First of all, thank you very much to the Scientific and Medical Network, David, Kevin, Peter, Julian, for having given me the opportunity to be here. I would like first of all to introduce this talk by saying that it is more a meditative talk than a regular talk. So sometimes if I don't introduce like this, people are reacting fastly. Because very often the emphasis is on the content of the words and not on the silent background which is behind and before the words. So it is only a question to displace the attention from the content to the background. And when we speak about the I, it is exactly the same. Usually the focus is on the body-mind. It means the focus is on the object of observation. And there is like a forgetting of what is before, what is perceiving. So the inquiry towards the nature of the I is like to go backward on the current of a river. Because usually when we speak about the I, we speak either about the body, the image of the body, either about the emotional reactions of likes and dislikes, which are conditioned by memory. And we usually never ask, but what is behind this? Who is the knower of the likes and the dislikes? It means when we say I like or I don't like, what is the I? Does the I really like or don't like? So this inquiry brings maturity in the understanding. It's not necessary to reject something or to approve, but just to observe and to take note of the functioning of the reactions and the involvement of the I image in these reactions. Usually because its functioning goes very fast, it looks like transparent. So when there is an emotional reaction, usually there is a fast conclusion that it comes from here or from there. Because the I image, which is behind the reactions, is not directly visible. So it needs a certain clarity of the observation, a certain acuity of the observation, to see the functioning. And this seeing, we could say, is liberating. Because by seeing the functioning, there is like a new space, a new dimension of space which emerges. A space which is no more related to the reactions, to the preferences and the choice systems. When the understanding is not mature, this space can also become an object of observation. It means silence and space becomes like something external. It means that it is necessary to go deeper in the exploration of the knower, of the silence and the space. For deconstructing the fixation on the object of observation. So it is like a game. It means like to go back around until that there is no place for moving. And this inquiry seems important if someday we would really like to be free from suffering. And if there is a natural desire to be free from suffering, it means that it is possible, that it is not a dream. Because when we inquire what we are really looking for, it brings us to this quality of being, which is free from emotivity, affectivity. So it means that usually there is a confusion, a misunderstanding about what we call I. So when somebody, for instance, for a therapist comes to visit you and is saying, so I have this, I am this, I was this, I will be. So there is like a turn around. Not like we would turn around the center of the axis. That's what we could say, like yesterday evening, the verticality. So this verticality usually is forgotten. Because there is an involvement in situations, an involvement in the mental process, the past or the future. You can realize that it is not possible to conceptualize the present moment. Because if there is conceptualization of the present moment, it is already the past. So it's only possible to be one with it. So to live the present moment is the fundamental experience of unity, of oneness. Very often we are living in the space in front because there is an habit to anticipate, to try to become, or to seem to become. It means that there is a fixation on the becoming process. So it's possible to take note of this, just to observe it like something which is on the table. But the space on the right, the space on the left, and the space behind can also be explored and be integrated like a wall. Means that usually there is an habit to live as a fraction. It is no more than an habit, because during the deep sleep there is a natural returning to the globality. The body also can be explored in the same way. The body appears as a tool which reflects the inner posture. Each tension on a physical level is the consequence of misunderstanding, the consequence of the idea that there is something to reach. It is for this reason that all the muscles, the agonist muscles, which are trying to grasp, are very often contracted because of this habit to try to grasp and control. This habit is the expression of a fear, like a fear of the unknown. Which creates a need to look for a kind of psychological security, which of course can never be found. And it is only when it appears very clearly in the mind, in the understanding, that there is no psychological security, that at this moment there is a releasing, the transformation of this habit. Controlling becomes accepting, and grasping becomes listening. And in accepting and listening, you can experience that there is no more question of time. It is not possible to listen yesterday or tomorrow. Listening finds its existence now. Like feeling and observing, they are the more natural tools of the consciousness. It is also important to see clearly the difference between feeling and I feel, or listening and I listen to. Because in real listening, there is no mentalization of the listening, there is only listening. The sentence, I am listening to, comes after. It is like something which arrives after, secondary, an interpretation. We could say that it is only a defense, a kind of escaping of that which is. Because when the sentence arrives, I am feeling or I am listening to, there is like a feeling of psychological security. It means that the experience of the present moment is put in a box, in a frame box, which contains the idea of the I and the idea of a situation or of a special place. So we could arrive to the understanding that time and space are only relative conclusions. If now you really inquire where you are, but with depth and authenticity, the natural answer will be, I don't know. We could say that silence will be the answer. We could say also that there is no answer. It means that when we say, I am here in Cambridge, and I am speaking, and the date is now and now, it is only conclusions. We could say that it is also an escaping. So it's possible to observe that there is a constant habit to escape. To try not to escape can also be an escape. Before to be an image, the body is a sensation. So don't mistake, the main topic of this conference was beyond the brain. So before to go beyond the brain, maybe we could explore the brain as a sensation. It is easily possible, for instance, to feel, to sense the left part of the brain. You can feel it now. It means to let come the vibration of the left part of the brain. The waves. And after that, to do the same with the right part of the brain. Only to feel it. So if it is possible to feel the brain, it means that that which feels the brain is not in the brain. So we touch here exactly the topic of the conference, which is that which is beyond or before the brain. The brain as a sensation which emerges in a silent background, sensitive silent background. And when you try to localize that which perceives, you cannot localize it. You cannot say that it is here, or here, or here, or here, or here. So fundamentally we are nowhere. But like this man in the film, in the video about the Alzheimer, said, the sense of the I remains. There is like a direct experience, permanent experience of the I. And this experience of the I, which is not I am something, which is before the I am something, the formulation I am something. This direct experience does not belong to the time-space. So it's both possible to use I am not and to use I am, or to use I. And to listen to the silent echo which remains after the I. And to be one with it. all this work brings like a natural desidentification or a seeing of what we are not. It means the I image. This identification is the main root of suffering. So, because if there is no more I with suffering, suffering has no more place, cannot continue to act. Suffering is a reaction. It's not a necessity. But beyond this reaction, you are. And this you who is free from suffering, is not concerned by the reaction. It is sometimes designed as the ultimate witness. If you wish now, we can share a dialogue. If you have some questions, it can help to precise or to clarify.
Could we have a microphone over here, please?
Different people have different uses of the words I and ego and self and so on and so on. And I don't know whether I've understood you correctly, but I have a feeling that what you're referring to as the I is what I would call the higher self, which one is in contact with in an altered state of consciousness. And the ego is simply the construct of this lifetime. And so it doesn't have the same reality as the I of the higher self. I'm wondering if I've understood you correctly.
So when you say the I is a part of the divine, of the cosmos, it means that it remains a conceptualization. Because what you are really, you cannot conceptualize it. So it is that what is before the conceptualization, before the thought I am a part of the cosmos, before the thought I am. So it needs a great sensitivity in the approach to displace the attention. And to stay at the level of the non-formulated I. At the right moment that the sentence, the thought appears, I am something, I am this, it is already a concept. It is already the apparition of a difference. A difference in front of the total unknowing.
The lady over there.
Could you tell us more about the vertical?
About?
The vertical.
I don't understand the word.
Vertical.
Let's go.
The vertical.
Verticality.
Vertical.
Vertical, yes.
Could you explain more your understanding of it?
First of all, you can experience it in your body. For instance, to feel right now a verticality, to touch with the sensitivity that you have, the space above. And to let this feeling of the verticality to text your body, to text your spine.
Can I ask a question from the chair?
Please?
It's just that I remember 2 years ago we had some discussion about the eye.
Yeah.
A chap called Guy Claxton talked to us, and my understanding is that in a way he sees the eye as being always in one of our outer layers, one of our personae, one of our masks that we put on to present to the world. And that is all there is, that ultimately the eye resides in one or other of these masks, but nowhere else. Now you're saying that is not the case. You're saying that the eye has an existence beyond and before. Is that right?
Yes.
The development of the personae.
Yes.
So how did the personae come about? What brings them into being?
If you inquire your memory, you can touch. You can be aware that there is something in your being which was here when you were a child, which is here when you are an adult, and which will be here tomorrow. So there is something in you which is beyond the movement and beyond the change. And it is this quality of I that we are now exploring.
Yes. Can we have the microphone down here?
I hesitate to ask a question because it seems that one needs a little special language to ask. The way you've been describing the eye, it's like something you don't usually use a noun to talk about. It's a standing back. It's almost like more like a verb than a noun. But my question was, this was standing back from back and back and back. It's, you're not really, I mean not you, but one, if one stands back, how does one then relate to another person? It seems the eye is so far back that...
Yes. But if you don't know what you are, how is it possible to know who he is or who she is? So, if we want to know the other, we need to know about what we are speaking. So, first of all, this exploration is necessary, and after that, it will bring a better understanding. And the question of the others, of the other, arises only after, or does not arise anymore.
So your personality is persona. You mustn't define yourself with relation to them. You refine yourself in yourself first, and then.
Yes. I will explain.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have not finished. I'm sorry. When you say you, when you say somebody, you speak about somebody else. This somebody else exists as, first of all, as a perception. Do you agree? There is a perception of the other. Yes. If there is no perception of the other, there is no other. Yes, you have the perception of somebody who is speaking to you. But this perception is living in you. This perception is living in your own consciousness. This perception appears in your own space. So I can't say that you or I have no separate existence to you, because the image that you have about me exists at the right moment in your own consciousness, in your own inner space.
And maybe completely false, my idea of you.
Please?
And my idea of you might be completely mistaken. I mean, I'm sorry.
When you let really the perception flow in you, to unfold in you as seeing, you arrive to the direct experience that the other exists only as a perception in the right moment. If I say you are a woman or you are I don't know what, it's already a conclusion. I put you in a box. If I don't say anything inside, you are free. And here is the main problem in what we call a relationship. I have an image about myself, and I have an image about yourself. And you have an image about yourself, and you have an image about myself. So the contact, the relationship is very poor. So we can explore what remains when there is no more image about I and about you. Without a name. But at this moment you can experience that there is contact. You cannot say between what and what, but there is a presence. And it is this presence which gives meaning to what we call relationship. So a relationship is only the awakening of a living presence. So from this perspective, there is a new way of life with your surroundings, which is no more considered as your family or your friends, which is more than that. When you say it is my family or my friend, it is already a fractioning, a reduction. And when you say I am a charming woman, it is also a reduction. So you know that you are not this.
I can't go on having a one-to-one dialogue. But partly life on the planet is more pinned down than that. It doesn't make it false or incorrect. It's part of why I care.
Which planet?
I have understood you. I do not have a question. My non-question is, has Jean-Marc been very influenced by Zen?
About whom are you speaking now?
Anyone he likes.
I would have thought that you were more interested, more influenced by Hinduism than Buddhism. That there was the ultimate I, the only subject, and this great I operates in smaller eyes of individual people. This small I is a device through which we gather around our experiences, our memories, our images of ourselves. The I which we would wish to become, to return to, is the transpersonal I, again the great I, the only subject. Am I right? About verticality that you mentioned, I would again have thought, influenced by Hinduism, that is the higher point of spiritual energy which surrounds us, and that we should bring these energies to flow through all parts of our being, through the emotional and through the instinctual. Again, am I right?
Just a moment, please. I would say again that the habit to put the perception, the understanding in a box is the expression of a fear. Of a fear. The fear. La peur en français. The fear. Because when we speak about the I, you can explore this question in your own being. And you will discover there is no place for Hinduism or Judaism or Christianism. We speak about the direct experience of what you are. something like a direct and total perception. It is an immediate experience, which is not related to the knowledge, to the second-hand knowledge that we read. Yes. Hello. But if I don't speak Hello. Is there somebody here? Thank you. So it was the answer. Of course, if you wish to put in boxes such an approach, you can put it in a box. But sometimes it can also be like an escape of the direct exploration. What is said here has nothing original. It has been said milliards of times, everywhere. It is only a living exploration. But only through this living exploration there is a possibility of direct understanding. This quality of understanding which is not related to the mind understanding. The mind can create a concept, but the concept is the expression of a reality which lies before the birth of the concept. So when you explore what is before the birth of the I thought, this exploration will bring a direct understanding which comes from the inner experience.
If I've understood it correctly, I think one of the hardest things about dialogue on a subject like this is because we're using words which are concrete to describe something which is abstract, which is just experience. And when you were talking about a relationship between two people, and you stand before the I, and the other person is there before you put them in a box, before you decide they're female, before anything. For me, it was the first time that I've ever felt that I've understood what it's like to not be separate from other people. And I just wanted to thank you for that, because it was just the experience of being without the words, without the concepts.
I just was to see whether I have properly understood you. Both ladies giving a little pause. Just in order to see whether what I began to think about in terms of my experience is in accord with what you were trying to say. As you began and you talked about the silence behind the sound and so on. Now, I've had no experience of meditation. I, in fact, wish to avoid that. But what I have had considerable experience of over nearly 50 years is making drawings. And as you sit very still, you could have been the subject for a drawing that I was making.
And I recall very well, very early on when learning to make drawings, and this has been true, I've seen a lot of people trying to learn to draw, is that they become conscious that I am drawing something. They become very conscious of the paper and whatever instrument they happen to have in their hand. You seem to be simply talking to me about pure observation. And once one begins to be able to, first of all, separate the figure out from the ground, in other words, be able to see the figure in space, to can feel the space between whatever is observed and what is observed, and also what is the space surrounding what is observed, then, and this isn't fanciful, one begins to operate with a completely conceptual-less operation of the hand. It's almost as though the physical eye is extended to touch what is there, and the hand, almost like a seismic needle, is moving against let us say, the white paper. But the white paper is no longer a surface. It is a virtual space. And this is really what you call to mind pure acts of observation, in which if you really are in contact in this way that I'm suggesting, but of course one may have to alter the circumstances and get away from an act of drawing, then any feeling about I vanishes. If I comes back and I think that now what I've got to do is get the hair in, or something of that sort, then the drawing starts to go wrong. So in other words, what I believed you were saying, starting off with this notion of needing to separate figure from ground, was in accord with that kind of experience. The only other thing I could say, of which I've had considerable experience, is making radio programs. So, not talking in this case about eye, but observing by ear, I've had to make judgments about when to bring a sound out of the silence, and when to return the sound again into silence, in order to be able to express a particular kind of emotion, perhaps, not for me, but for whoever happens to listen. Are we at one at all on this?
During the drawing, there is only drawing, there is only acting. When you say, I am drawing,
yes, we begin to enter,
right, it is already an interpretation.
That's right. And you must not think.
Yes.
You must not think.
And it disturbs the natural flowing.
Yes. And with reference to time, time disappears.
Shall we have two more comments, two more pieces of dialogue? One from the gentleman in the centre.
Dr. Mantell, I just wanted to say that our hearts have touched. Thank you. The second thing I would like to ask, you have the association, the International Association of Spiritual Psychiatry. If it's appropriate, is this the time for you to share what your goal is and what your projects are?
No, I think it is not really appropriate to the right moment.
There's a lady at the back.
Maybe Rachel.
Thank you. Part of me was aware of the whole eye, the inside and outside, observing the whole process, which was beautiful. When you mentioned purr, and then you mentioned animation, I have a purr her name is Naomi. She is an animal, she's a cat. And we are together without words, without sound, and without space in the garden at 1 in the mornings with the dawn coming up. The oneness that you describe of being, rather than necessarily even observing, is something that Per certainly knows. Thank you very much for describing it so beautifully, and thank you for the young lady in the front who gave us a very interesting interaction and exploration with you. It was beautiful.
Mark, I'm so grateful for that, and I think we all are grateful for that. Why do I say I? I think we are all grateful.